Hi guys, in this chapter we will learn how to draw a graph, we will learn how to calculate the speed in the graph and also the distance in the graph. So firstly we look at this example. The question have given the data. Alright, this is the data given. So we need to know what is the scale, right? Before we sketch the graph, right? So we can see by ourselves in this time we can see all of them are plus 30, right? 30 plus 30 is 60, 60 plus 30 is 90, 90 plus 30 is 120, right? So in this scale, what we call 30, in this scale we can use 30 or 20 or 10. But with 10, the graph given is very huge, right? So if possible, we use 30 or 20. Alright, so distance is the same. We can either straight away use 10, because plus 10, right? 10 plus 10 is 20, plus 10 30, plus 10 40, right? So we can either use 10 or 5. Alright, so we look at this graph, use 5 as a scale and we use 20 as a scale, so the graph looks more better. Alright, so next we see this is also an example, distance with time. So in this time we can straight away use 10. Alright, straight away use 10 as a scale. Because why this question we can use 5 as a scale is because it just has 1 2 3 4 5 as a data. So we need to determine ourselves how many is the data and the graph given by the teacher, is it possible to use 5 as a scale. So we need to use pencil, if possible use pencil to sketch first before you use pen, right? So this we got 1 2 3 4 5 6 data, so we just straight away use 10, because if 5 is too lot, right? 5 you need to time, no, if 5 is too lot, right? So if possible we use 10. And distance we need to determine what is the largest data, 100, right? So 100, either we can use 10 or 20. Alright, because 20 we just need 5, right? 20 40 60 80 and 100 looks good, right? If 10, it goes more detail, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, right? So it's too lot. If 10, we use 20. Okay, so the graph is like this. We use 10 minute and we use 20 as a scale for distance. Alright, so this is an example question that SPM usually goes out. Alright, so it will not give you this data table. You need to do by yourself. Alright, so he will only give you this formula. This D equals to 60t plus 20, and it says T is a time. Alright, T is a time and D is the distance. So we got these two variables, so we are able to find a graph like this, and then this is the time, this is the distance, right? So we are able to find this graph already, right? So firstly we need to sub value for time from 0 to 5 or 6, either this number lah, right? Don't get too lot, okay? 5 or 6 is enough. Alright, depends on your graph, okay? So we sub one by one. D equal to 60. If the time is 0, so we sub 0 over here. So 60 times 0 will be 0, right? So this will be 0. Then less 20. So we see 20. Alright, so goes to the next. So if T is equal to 1, so 61 plus 20, right? So it will be 80. Alright, so we need to sub one by one. Alright, after we have sub one by one, we need to sketch the graph, right? Usually the question after you calculate this data, so we need to sketch the graph. So we just use time as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this we look at the most largest one, okay? Most largest one. And then we determine ourselves lah whether our graph are able to use 50 or not. But mostly can lah, so we use 50 because the value is very high, right? Value is above 300. It's above 300. So we use 50 as a scale. Alright, then we just point. Okay, this 0 is 20. So we determine like somewhere here is 20, then we point 0 over here. Then we point, then we sketch the graph. Alright. It's easy, right? So next, this is the question from textbook. So let us see. The distance graph, the distance time show that a motion of a car at a tour bus. So we know that there are two cars. One is car, one is tour bus. There's a car and a bus. Then graph OA represent the motion from Puchong to Malacca. Alright. So and graph BC represent Malacca to Puchong. Then what is the question 1? Determine the difference speed in kilometer per hour. Okay, so different speed. So how do we need to find speed in a graph? So remember this, if the question asks you to find speed in the graph, so in the graph, in distance and time graph, alright, the speed represent the gradient. Alright, m is the gradient lah, huh? M is the gradient. So how do we need to find speed? Then we just find the gradient. Alright, so let us see this question. So we know that OA is from where? From Puchong to Malacca. Puchong to Malacca. And then BC is from Malacca to Puchong, right? Okay, so we find ourselves. So firstly, we find OA first. So how do we find gradient in the graph? So we got two formula, right? So one is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, right? So another formula is y-intercept divided by x-intercept, right? So you guys know already, right? Y-intercept is x equal to 0, right? X-intercept is y equal to 0. So let us find this OA. So we just use this both formula lah. So this both formula find the same thing, alright? So it's just different formula. Okay, so OA. So in OA. Okay, first here is 0, 0. Here is 152. Okay, we just delete this. Alright, 152. And then this is x. Oh, sorry. This is 2. A is 250. This is x. This is y. Alright, so what formula do we need to use? So this is no intercept, right? A here, no other intercept, right? So we use this formula, y2 minus y1. So if I say this is y2, x2, x1, y1. Alright, this is x1. Okay, so 150 minus 0, 2 minus 0. So calculate. So will be 2, 7, then 1, 75, right? So OA we have calculated 75 kilometer per hour per second. So alright, so we calculate BC. Okay, BC. So we already know BC is the y-intercept, right? BC is the y-intercept, right? BC represent y-intercept. Because of what? Why we know that this is the y-intercept? Because we know that the bx is equal to 0, right? Because here is equal to 0, right? So in C, we already know this is the x-intercept, right? Because it intersection in here. Why we know this is x-intercept? Because the y is equal to 0. Alright, so we just straight away use this formula, right? It's more easier to let us to find the gradient, right? So BC is what? Y-intercept divided by x-intercept. So y-intercept is how much? 150, right? 150 divide 3. So it will be 50 kilometer per hour, right? Okay, so we have already done all, but the question asks the difference in speed, right? So we just need to minus it up lah. 75 minus 50, how much? 525, right? Kilometer per hour. So let us see. Yes, it's correct, right? So it's just simple as that. So remember, if we need to find, if the question want us to find speed, we just find the gradient in the graph. Alright, it's just for distance time graph. Alright, so next, this question, velocity per time. Okay, so this example is a velocity per time graph. Just now we learned one is distance per gram, distance per time, right? Distance per time. Remember this? Distance per time. So this example is velocity per time. So what is velocity? Velocity is actually speed lah. Alright, velocity is actually speed. So velocity graph. So graphical time. Okay, so he already give you the data. So you just sketch the data by using the scale. So time we use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we just use 5 lah. Don't sketch too long out of the graph and don't sketch too small. Just moderate. Alright? Okay, so in this question asks, what is the relationship between area under the speed time graph? Alright. The question asks, area under the speed time graph. So, what is the area under the speed time graph? So we know that this is speed, right? This is speed. Then this is time. So if we find the area in the speed time graph, this area represents the distance. Alright? So just remember that if we find area equal to distance. Alright? Okay, so let us find the area under the speed time graph. Let us see. Okay, just see this example lah. So it find the area here. Alright, find the area here. So we find ourselves. If we need to find the area over here, so we know that this long is 10, right? So this here is 4 over 5, right? So and then this here is 5, right? So we draw it out like something like this. Okay, so this is 5, this is 10, this is the 4 over 5. Alright, so how do we find this? So we just use the formula lah. This is the trapezium graph, right? Trapezium. So we just use the trapezium formula to find the graph. So 1 over 2 times 4 over 5 times 5 plus 10 plus this different, then is equal to 6. So 6 is km lah. Alright, so it just same. Alright, so that's all for this topic. Hope you guys got learned something. Yeah, that's all from now. Thank you.
Fight!